Hello students, welcome to the fifth session for 12th standard science biology dealing with the chapter the sexual reproduction in case of the flowering plants. Well, up till now we have discussed very well about the male gametophyte, the female gametophyte and the pollination, its various aspects, the pollen-pistil interaction and the post-fertilization events up to the endosperm. Now today our main focus of attention is on the other aspects of the post-fertilization events. So let us go into much detail of it. Now focusing on the embryo. Now embryo develops at the micropylar end of the embryo sac where the zygote is situated. Most zygote divides only after the certain amount of the endosperm is formed. This is an adaptation to provide the assured nutrition to the developing embryo. And though the seed differs greatly, the early stage of the embryo development known as the embryogeny are similar to both in case of the monocots as well as in case of the dicots. The zygote gives rise to the pro-embryo and subsequently to the globular, heart-shaped and the mature embryo also. The typical dicot embryo consists of the embryonal axis and the two cotyledons. Here we can observe the division of the cell giving rise to the upper portion, that is the suspensor cells, and the lowermost cell known as the pro-embryo, which will be further helping in the formation of the complete globular embryo. Also, the heart-shaped embryo is also formed, and later on the torpedo-shaped embryo. Here we can easily observe in case of the dicot ones as well as in case of the monocots. So typical dicot consists of an embryonal axis and the two cotyledons. The portion of the embryonal axis above the level of the cotyledons is said to be the epicotyle, which terminates with the plumule or the stem tip. Further, the cylindrical portion below the level of the cotyledon is the hypocotyle that terminates at its lower end in the radicle or the root tip, and the root tip is covered by the root cap. So, here we can easily observe the cotyledons and the plumule, the hypocotyle and the radicle, which will be giving rise to the root system later on. Well, the embryos of the monocot, if you observe, it possesses only one cotyledon. In the grass family, the cotyledon is known as the scutellum, that is situated towards the side, that is on the lateral side of the embryonal axis. Moreover, at its lower end, the embryonal axis has the radicle and the root cap that is enclosed in an undifferentiated sheath known as the coleorhiza. The portion of the embryonal axis above the level of the attachment of scutellum is known as the epicotyle. And this epicotyle has a shorter apex and a few leaf primordia enclosed in a hollow foliar structure known as the coleoptile. So here we can observe that how the formation of the coleorhiza and the coleoptile ultimately it takes place. Now this will be further helping in the formation of the seeds. So focusing on the seeds. Here we can easily observe that how the seed development takes place and the radicle arising or giving rise to the root system. Well, in the angiosperms, the seed is the final product of sexual reproduction. It is often described as a fertilized ovule, and the seeds are formed inside a fruit. A typical seed consists of a seed coat, the cotyledons and the embryonal axis, and which later on forms or it is mainly present in a lot of fruits, that is the seeds. So based on the seeds, there are variations in case of the fruits also. If it is having a lot of food content, it is said to be the fleshy fruits. And the time of the fruit develops from the ovary, the other floral parts degenerate and they ultimately fall off. In the LS, that is the longitudinal section of the ovary of a papaya, if you observe, lot of seeds are mainly present. And furthermore, the proper development in such a way that it gives rise to a number of seeds which are useful for the development of the typical plant and later on forming the fruit also. In case of the apple, we observe only the two categories of the seeds. An apple is nothing but the growth of the fruit from the thalamus. So the different parts of the flower, they have a huge role to play in the development of the fruits. So the fruit not only develops from the flower but from the various regions of the flower also. Furthermore, there are certain, in most of the plants, the time of the fruit develops from the ovary and the other floral whorls, it ultimately dehisces. And although in most of the species, the fruits are the results of the fertilization, there are some species in which the fruit develops from, or I should say without the fertilization. Such are said to be the parthenocarpic fruits. Banana is one such example. The parthenocarpy can be induced through the application of the growth hormones, and such fruits are seedless. So it develops from the inner tissue of the ovary and the ovule remnants also. So if you observe the parts of a typical fruit in the longitudinal section of the mango, we can see the outer coat, that is the pericarp, then the seed also. And such seed which can later on grow into the other plant, that is the mango plant, if it is subsequently and growth in a proper way. Focusing into the structure of a typical seed, we can see that it is covered by the seed coat, the outer integuments and the inner integuments. Integuments means the covering that is there. And the place from where the radicle arises, that is said to be the micropyle. How long do the seeds remain alive after they are dispersed? Well, that depends on the type of the seeds and the period of the availability also. In the two categories of the seeds, we can see that the embryonal axis, the embryo, the cotyledons and the endosperm, its location varies a lot. And the seed is the basis for our agriculture purpose, which contains the reserve food material, which ultimately helps in the proper growth of the plant that nourishes the developing embryo, in short. In case of the bean seed, that is a non-albuminous seed, it consists of the plumule, the root, the funiculus scar and the testa. So the outer coats to the inner part, a lot of structures are there which helps in the proper growth and the development of the plant. The bean seed and the maize seed, one a non-albuminous and the maize seed having the albumin content, so it is said to be the albuminous seed also. The various regions we can observe and the location of the endosperm, the content of the endosperm which differs a lot. In case of the seeds of the black pepper also, we can see that how the endosperm looks like, and the perisperm, which is basically the edible portion that is mainly used for the content of our food also. In case of the corns, if you observe there, in the inner structure of it, here we'll be able to observe the mature corn seed. And if you observe the longitudinal section of it, the inner contents shown a lot of the endosperm content. Embryo lying in the longitudinal axis, and furthermore, if it is grown in a proper way, then the development of the plant ultimately takes place. So here we can observe the germination of the maize seed, the arising of the radicle and the plumule. Radicle giving rise to the root system and the plumule giving rise to the shoot system. So the root system mainly arises from the radicle and the shoot system arising from the plumule. Well, the seeds are the basis for the agriculture purpose, and they have a huge role to play. Dehydration and the dormancy of the mature seeds are crucial for the storage of the seeds, which can be used as food throughout the year and also as to raise crops in the next season. Well, in a few species, the seeds they lose viability within a few months also. So, seeds of a larger number of species they live for several years. Some seeds it can remain alive for hundreds of years also. Here we can see some of the species or some of the species of the seeds having the ability to live for a number of years. And the typical structure having multiple seeds, which when they fall off, they give rise to a new plant. Now, how they fall off, it is totally dependent on the nature. So the biotic and the abiotic factors, they have a huge role to play in the growth of the plant. And if the seed it falls off, the outer seed coat ultimately bursts out, mainly owing to the nature and giving rise to the root and the shoot, which gives rise to the proper structure of the entire plant. If you observe the cross section of a pea plant, here we can see the location of the pistil and the stamen. How the pistil and the stamen they are ultimately located, and how the transfer of the pollen grains mainly take place. The bursting of the pollen grains, that is the bursting of the anther to release the pollen grains also. Seeds are the basis for the agriculture purposes, and the dehydration and dormancy is a crucial factor. So the way the seeds are processed, that is the farmers which are sowing the hybridized seeds also, the multi-purpose seeds are used so that the productivity is more. In short, the yield, Y-I-E-L-D, yield is more, giving rise to a lot of hybrid crops, which increases the productivity of the plants and gives rise to the new contents. Here we can observe the seeds borne by the hybrid crops. The wheat seedling how it grows, and it possesses the hybrid characteristics, that is, the mixed characteristics it possesses. So, although the seeds in general are the products of fertilization, a few flowering plants, such as some species of Asteraceae and grasses, they have evolved a special mechanism to produce seeds without the fertilization, and that is said to be the Apomixis. So, there are several ways of the development of the apomictic seeds also. Here we can observe how apomixis ultimately takes place. In some species, the diploid egg cell is formed without the reduction division and develops into the embryo without fertilization. More often, in many of the citrus and in case of the mango varieties, the sum of the nuclear cells, they surround the embryo and start dividing, protrude into the embryo sac, develops into the embryo. In such species, each ovule contains many embryos, and the occurrence of more than one embryo in a seed is referred to as the polyembryony. So, such hybrid varieties of the several seeds which are found in our fruit, means in our food, and the vegetable crops are being extensively cultivated. So, no segregation of the characteristics. So, hybrid characteristics are mainly used. So, the cultivation of such hybrid varieties has tremendously increased in case of the productivity. If the seeds collected from the hybrids are sown, then the plants in the progeny will segregate and do not maintain the hybrid characteristics. So, the production of the hybrid seeds is costly, and hence the cost of the hybrid seeds becomes too expensive for many of the farmers also. In case of the citrus fruits, here we can observe that there are multiple embryos which are formed and giving rise to the process known as the polyembryony. So, the occurrence of more than one embryo in a typical seed, that is said to be the polyembryony. Furthermore, in the hybrid seed industry, a lot of multiple hybrid seeds are used by the farmers, but everyone, they cannot afford to do so. So that is the end of the entire chapter dealing with the sexual reproduction in case of the flowering plants. Well, in the next class we shall discuss in much detail about one more new and exciting chapter of 12th standard biology. Thank you very much.